Welcome to Electrified. It's your host, Dylan Loomis. Happy Labor Day to everybody and to anyone out there saying, Dylan, why are you working today? Well, I genuinely don't view what I do as work. I truly enjoy it. I look forward to it. I view it as a privilege. And pair that with the fact that I will be out of town this coming Thursday through Sunday, so I will properly celebrate my Labor Day this coming weekend. And a reminder, most likely no video on Thursday and Friday this week. And before we get into it, a special shout out to my newest patrons, Lazang and Lloyd. Thank you both very much. So as you can see, somebody on Reddit sharing some gas prices from California, $5.79 per gallon for a regular gallon of gas. If any of you out there are experiencing gas prices higher than $5, please let me know. I would be curious to hear where you're at. Florida Alex on Reddit shared a 12-volt battery replacement by Tesla mobile service, and it was cheaper than he expected. I know a lot of people had questions about what the cost of this replacement would be, thinking it might be between $200 and $400, but his was $119, and there were some other people in the comments saying they had the 12-volt battery replaced as well, and their total was also around that $120 figure. Ionite34 on Reddit shared an infrared image of the refreshed Model S seat cooling. So as you can see, the surrounding cabin temperature is warm, and then the seat itself is clocking in at about 15.2 degrees Celsius, definitely much cooler than the rest of the cabin. And for those of us in the States, as you can see, this is actually very effective, as that's 59 degrees Fahrenheit, which is definitely pretty cool. So hopefully one day the cooled seats can trickle their way down to the Model 3 and all other Tesla vehicles. Simon Alvarez from Teslarati wrote an article about how when Tesla started the Model 3, they used a silicon carbide chip, which was a shift away from the norm in the industry using just silicon for the power electronics in electric vehicles. And I figured now would be a good time to give you a quick overview just so you have another talking point when in conversation with a Tesla skeptic, as just one more thing that separates Tesla from the rest of the bunch. Before we get there though, SiC, the silicon carbide chips, are still more expensive than conventional silicon chips today, but 5 years ago, SiC chips were about 10 times more expensive than traditional silicon. Today, they're only twice as expensive. So the big three enabling technologies commonly cited for EVs are the battery, the electric motor, and the power electronics. So right now we're focusing on the power electronics, which are critical for several functions, but most critical of all is the main inverter, which converts the DC battery into three-phase AC for the smooth operation of the electric traction motor. And at the core of these power electronic devices is a power switch technology known as transistors. So, with the release of the Model 3 in 2018, Tesla became the first company to add these silicon carbide metal oxide semiconductor field effect transistors. This is the acronym, sourced from ST Microelectronics, and it was an in-house inverter design. The overall design has several innovations beyond the use of just silicon carbide packages, but this is the main one. Now, bear in mind, we could go a lot further into the weeds with this, but for now, I just want to give you some high-level talking points if need be. Of course, with most emerging technology, cost has been the biggest barrier to mainstream adoption. But Tesla seems to have solved this too. Its inverter has undergone a remarkable cost decline in only 3 years. The result: Tesla's overall inverter and permanent magnet motor combination is one of, if not the best on the market, fancy that, achieving a 97% efficiency, yielding more range without increasing expensive battery capacity, all at a similar cost to the older technologies being displaced. And I'd like to run through the highlights of this interview between John Palmer, the CTO at Cree. And if you're not familiar, Cree has plenty of experience with silicon carbide, as they have invested over $1 billion in the expansion of their silicon carbide capacity, and they are headquartered here in the US in Durham, North Carolina. So silicon carbide is more expensive than silicon insulated gate bipolar transistors. Don't worry about that for now. And the places we get our wins is where they realize the savings at the system level. It's almost always a system sell. So while the actual silicon carbide device itself is still more expensive than just the silicon version, at the system level, meaning the overall system that chip is integrated into, that's where the cost savings are received. So how does the manufacturing process of silicon carbide compare to just silicon? Obviously a huge deal with the chip shortage and the massive investment that is a chip fab. If you're talking materials growth, it's different. Crystal growth is different, wafering, polishing, epitaxy, they're all different. But once you get into the fab, it's fairly standard equipment with the exception of 2 or 3 processes, which are heavily tailored to silicon carbide. The fundamental fab processes are very silicon-like, and the bulk of the clean room equipment is typical silicon equipment. So the base foundation is the same, but the silicon carbide has a few processes that are definitely different. Will there be economies of scale for silicon carbide as it gets used more? Yes, it will be a little more asymptotic than Moore's law because of the thermal considerations, but we're definitely early in the cost down curve. From 2017 to 2014, we expect volume to increase by 30 times. So the gist here is that Tesla's move to silicon carbide in the Model 3 has once again sent shockwaves through the industry and is now causing other automakers to change plans. In June, German chipmaker Infineon unveiled their silicon carbide model for EV inverters. Hyundai later announced that these Infineon-made SiC chips would be in their next-gen EVs. And so once again, Tesla is pushing it another field forward, seemingly single-handedly, taking bold moves, and they have mostly paid off. Speaking of other automakers being forced to do wild things, this is the latest industry Hail Mary, an attempt to stay relevant. I personally am not that optimistic that this relationship will work or be fruitful in any degree, but it's important to know what these other automakers are trying to do at the very least. Honda and GM to share an EV platform for lower cost North American models. Honda will start selling EVs in the North American market made with over 50% of the same parts as GM cars. The Japanese automaker plans to provide GM with design info on its EV platform, the base structure on which the body and key components are built. And the need to keep costs down while transforming their lineups has pushed many industry players to collaborate in order to survive. So far, as mentioned, most of these relationships have not been fruitful and many others have already dissolved. The companies will sell EVs that share over 50% of their components in terms of cost. Only exterior and interior designs will differentiate the partners' vehicles. By sharing EV platforms, Honda and GM will be able to standardize motors, batteries, inverters, and other key components. This kind of collaboration will bring cost savings through ordering large quantities of the same parts. As mentioned, there are other partnerships. Nissan and Renault, which are in alliance with Mitsubishi Motors, plan to share around 70% of EV motors, batteries, and other parts. Toyota, Suzuki, and Daihatsu Motor have formed a partnership to develop EV commercial vehicles. Volkswagen and Ford are also teaming up to develop EVs. This is not the first time Honda and GM have worked together. In 2017, they established a joint venture in the US to produce hydrogen fuel cell systems. In autonomous driving, Honda has invested in GM's Cruise subsidiary with the intention of researching unmanned ride-sharing services. We've been saying it for years, but the legacy OEMs are going to be scrambling to remain relevant, and it is moves just like this that confirm that notion. Pretty big news here, actually shared by Green the Only on Twitter. So he said the EU, the European Union, is supported and FSD beta is officially testing in the EU, just with people under NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, obviously, so you don't see the videos published. So a lot of people were wondering and thinking that the EU might have to wait a long time to see FSD, as Tesla was mainly testing and doing their iterations for the North American market. That is still probably the primary market, but as Green seemingly confirmed, it does look like there is some real world testing being done in the EU, so that is definitely encouraging for all EU residents. There was also speculation that there was some real world testing going on in China, but of course with the China privacy security concerns and a lot of that data needing to be stored on Chinese or in Chinese data centers, Green could not say for sure as the data is stored in their servers. There was a trending post on Reddit about a Model X being used as an evacuation vehicle, and the owner, Smacky, was very pleased with the experience. One thing I wanted to highlight is the evacuation traffic. The charge was amazing. It'll go for days in stop and go traffic. They usually make it to a certain supercharger with about 7% left after going 80 miles per hour the whole way. After 4 hours of traffic, stop and go, they made it there with 30% remaining charge. And you can pause the screen to read the rest of why they thought the Model X was such a great evacuation vehicle, but that is the part I wanted to highlight. Not a great anecdote here for the Chevy Bolt, but as you can see, there is a sign for customer safety. Chevy Bolt EVs are strictly prohibited from parking at this facility, of course worried about potential fires. And NIO is set to open the first NIO house overseas in Norway on September 23rd this month. where they will unveil the local pricing for their new vehicle, the ES8. No, that is not this vehicle. This right here is the Neo ES8. But that is all for today. Please take a second to like the video if you did. Go and enjoy the rest of your Labor Day or the rest of your week if you're watching this later. And a huge thank you to all of my Patreon supporters.